Why?
I'm too tired to think about that. Okay, our recording is on. We are good to go. Okay, once again, we were up to Itmar. So yesterday we were learning about the Machlokes Rav and Shmuel, and we said that the Machlokes Rav and Shmuel is Isha Achas like Shtei Noshim, meaning someone made kedushin to a woman almanas that she has no nedarim. Then he divorced her from the kedushin, and then he was kindness her. Then he was boiled her without specifying. And the machlokes is: do we say like Rav that the bia will be a bia l'shem kedushin because ein adam oisa bilasa bilasnus, or we say like Shmuel that the bia is al das the original kedushin, and if the original kedushin isn't good because of the t'nai, because she has nedarim on her, so too the second bia won't be chal either. There won't be any kedushin chal. And then Rabbah came along and said that this whole shaila is exactly in that case where it's one bia, where it's one lady, but it's like two ladies because of the fact that there's a gershon in between. But if it's one, meaning if someone made kedushin on a lady almanas that she does not have any nedarim, and then he went and made a bia, everybody would agree that that bia does not constitute a kedushin because he's sticking with the t'nai of his original kedushin. Itmar, we had a shaila as follows. Itmar nami Amar of Acha bar Yaakov Amar of Yechanan Hamakadosh al t'nai. If someone is mekadosh a woman with a t'nai that she has no nedarim on her, ubal, and then he was boil her, divrei akoil, both Rav and Shmuel agree that ain't it tzricha himenu get. So we have a concurring opinion. Not only does Rabbah say this, but Reb Acha bar Yaakov says the same thing in the name of Rabbi Yechanan. Eisvei Reb Acha bar Ravika bar Achsei. Reb Acha bar Ravika, who was the son of the sister of Reb Acha bar Yaakov. So basically, Reb Acha bar Ravika is asking a question to his uncle, Reb Acha bar Yaakov. And this is his question. Chalitza mutas. If someone makes a chalitza, a mistaken chalitza, which is yet undefined what that means. If someone makes a mistaken chalitza, ksheira, that will be kosher. Ezoi he chalitza mutas. What is a mistaken chalitza? Amrish Lakish, imagine someone doesn't want to do chalitza. He wants to do even. And we're trying to convince him to do chalitza. So we fool him and we tell him, you fool, you hoodwink the chalitz, the oven, and you tell him if you do this chalitza process, that's the way that you're going to be koiner. When in fact that's not true. So that is a chalitza mutas. Omer Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Yochanan told Rish Lakish, Ani shoyna, I hold, bein sheneschav and hu v'lo neschav mahi. So if he had kavana for the chalitza, yet she did not, or bein sheneschav mahi v'lo neschav mahi, or if she had kavana for the chalitza and he didn't, either way it's chalitza psula. Achi yeschav nushneim. Till they both have chalitza, till they both have kavana, both the man and the woman. The At Amrit and you, Rish Lakish, want to say that when you tell him that this is not releasing her, rather this is being kind to her, you're going to say chalitza ksheira. Madich, I'm telling you that they both have to have kavana to do the chalitza, and you're telling me such a chalitza will be kosher. So therefore, that cannot be what the Brisa says, a chalitza mutas, which is ksheira. I'll tell you what chalitza mutas is ksheira. That's if kol sha'omer lechalotzla almanasha titin lech masayimsus. We tell him give her a chalitza which will free her, but she's going to pay you 200 zuz. There, if he does the chalitza and she doesn't give the 200 zuz, the chalitza is still valid. So before we get into what the Gemara is trying to prove from here, let's just drill down a little bit to understand what is this that the Breichen said that she has to have kavana and he has to have kavana. So it's actually a machloikis. It's a machloikis, the chinuch and the Chacham Tzvi. The Chacham Tzvi says, declares, there's two possible kavanas that we could be referring to here. It could be the kavana to be yoytze the mitzvah of chalitza, or it could be the kavana to make this kinyan, where she's being freed and he's freeing her. The Chacham Tzvi Pashta says that this kavana that we're referring to is not the kavana shamitzvah, to be yoytze the mitzvah. It's just the kavana for him to free her, so for her to be freed from him, for her to be released from his zika. And this makes a shtickle nafkamina. And the question that we had discussed it in Yavamas, is there a mitzvah of chalitza, or is chalitza just a release? Lamai nafkamina. Let's say it's an older woman who falls to Yibam, and she has no interest in remarrying. Can she just forget it and keep the zika? Or does she have a mitzvah to do the chalitza? So the Chacham Tzvi wants to say that she doesn't have to do the chalitza. It's just a release. So because chalitza isn't a mitzvah, it's just a heter. And therefore, the kavanah that you need to have to make the chalitza kshera is the transaction law. Meaning he has to have kavanah to release her, she has to kavanah to be kind to herself. But there's no specific kavanah mitzvah. The chinuch holds there's both. There's a kavanah mitzvah as well. But I'll call upon him, you have to have kavanah to do a chalitza, otherwise it won't work. So when it says chalitza mutas kshera, it means when he was fooled. He was told that he would get 200 zuz for the chalitza, and even though she doesn't give it at the end, the chalitza that he did is still valid. Alma, what do you see from here that's relevant to our sugya? Even David Maisa, once the Maisa chalitza is done, achul achal etnoi, the t'nai is no longer relevant. So hachanami, in our case, where he was boiler, even though it was a t'nai, like for instance the case that we had on a base that Harenu boyalech al manashe yirtza abba. We said that if someone says I'll be boiling you to be kind to you as wife, al manashe yirtza abba unless my father should want. We look at it like a t'nai, and Bryce said before that if the father protests, in fact the kedusha won't be chal. But frankly, Gemara here, hachanami, why did you say even the bowl achuli achle l'tnai? Just like the chalitza is chal, even though you're not mekayim b'tnai later, and he doesn't pay up the two, and she doesn't pay up the 200 zuz. So too, why don't you say the kedushin is going to be chal, even though the t'nai wasn't mekayim? Omer le'bai b'rav shaper kamrat. Is that really a question? Are you really asking a good question? That there's no t'nai, the t'nai is bottle because the ma'isa was done. Michti. Let's think about this. Kol t'noi meheche gamriyan. Where do we know this halacha that it's not even works? Mechatai can work. Where do you know? We know it mitnai b'nei Gad and b'nei Reuven. And Moshe Rabbeinu made a t'nai with them. He said, if you are going to come im yavru, if you're going to come over with Klal Yisrael and fight for Eretz Yisrael, then we'll give you the chelik that you requested in Puslora. It's an Eva Yarden. But if you're not going to, then you're not going to get your chelik in Eva Yarden. So that's the makar of all t'noim. So therefore we say that t'nai only works in a case that's similar to the original t'nai of Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven. And what are the similarities that we're looking for? To know the efshir the kiyuma al yedei shliach. The t'nai has to be about something that could be done yedei shliach. So the t'nai by Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven was related to chalukah zarek, to giving out the land. Did Moshe Rabbeinu himself have to distribute the land? Absolutely not. In fact, Moshe didn't distribute the land. Moshe made the t'nai with Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven, but who distributed the land? Yeshua did. So something that could be done al yedei shliach, such as the distribution of Eretz Yisrael, their t'nai will work. Kihosam have a t'nai, but t'nai the lo efshel l'kiyum al yedei shliach. But a t'nai for an action that cannot be done through a shliach, lo have a t'nai. So, for instance, chalitza. The reason why chalitza, even if she doesn't give the 200 zuz, the chalitza is still chal, is because chalitza cannot be done through a shliach. It has to be done by him to her. He can't have his friend do chalitza on his behalf, and therefore, you cannot make a t'nai for chalitza. So, Frank the Gemara v'habiyah, let's look at this kedusha biyah. You can't tell your friend, be boil this woman, and then I'll be kind to her. That doesn't work. So, Oibazoi, since it's le'efshir l'kama de'shliach kihasam, just like chalitza, but v'kahavatna. Yet we said that if someone says, I'm being boil, I'm a nash, that my father will be maskim, and his father's not maskim. In fact, it's not a kedusha. So what's the difference between chalitza, which we say, since it cannot be done through a shliach, a t'nai doesn't have an impact on it, yet biyah, which also cannot be done through a shliach, and the t'nai does have an impact on it. And for the Gemara, biyah of kedushin is different. It says in the parsha of Machzik Rishasai that if someone divorces his wife, and she went and became married to another man. V'hais is referring to all the different types of kedusha. Sai kesef, sai shtar, and sai biyah. Just like kesef, just like kedusha kesef can be done with the shliach, so too kedusha biyah can also be done. Not with the shliach. Just like kedusha kesef can be done with a t'nai, so too kedusha biyah can be done with a t'nai, even though it doesn't have the attribute that it could be done with their shliach. So Tosfos asks a very important question. If we're saying that anything, in order for you to be able to make a t'nai on it, has to be similar to the story of Chalukas Haaretz of Bnei Gad and Bnei Ruvain, so how do you know where to draw the line? Maybe you should learn that only by Chalukas Haaretz you can make a t'nai. Maybe you can learn that only Moshe Rabbeinu can make a t'nai. How do you know what attribute of the Bnei Gad and Bnei Ruvain is significant, so that we should say that's what it is that allows you to make it t'nai? So Tosfos says a very gishmak pshat, and it's one of the yesodis of Kesubos that we have to remember. So if I slide over the Tosfos and I move up a little bit towards the top, v'yesh loymar of Tosfos, the hanu taima, the hoyel v'amaisa kol kach biyodoi, sheyochel akama the shliach. Since you have such control over this maisa that you can make it through a shliach, I'm so in control of giving out Eretz Yisrael that I can even delegate it to somebody else. I'm so in control of kedusha kesef that I could even delegate it to somebody else. I'm so in control of truma, of making something truma, that I can delegate it to somebody else. Svaruhu sheyehei k'moikein biyodoi l'shavi beitna. Since I have so much control over this transaction, I should also be able to assert a t'nai into it. Av chalitza she'ein biyodi l'kama al-yidei shliach. Chalitza, which you're not so in control of this maisa, because you need to do it yourself, you can't delegate it. Therefore, lahava biyodi nami lemir mebeitna. So the briskers learn pshat in this Tosfos that it's a din bilas. If you have a bilas control over this action, then you could also make a t'nai on it. But if you don't have control over this action, you don't have a bilas because you can't delegate it. That says you don't have enough control over it to be able to make a t'nai. The Pnei Yeshua says, if it wasn't for the fact that Tosfos says this, I would have suggested the opposites for it. And that is, since I could make a shliach over it, it shows that this is less connected to me. Chalukas Haaretz is less connected to Moshe Rabbeinu because it doesn't have to be done from him. It can be done for somebody else. So it's less of a dominant maisa. Since it's less of a dominant maisa, you can put a t'nai into it. Mashenkin, chalitza, which is a very dominant maisa, because it's directly connected to me. It's directly connected to me because it cannot be done by anyone else. Such a thing, I shouldn't be able to make a t'nai. So there's two different svaras that we have amongst the Rishonim and early Achronim as to why being able to make a t'nai should be dependent on being able to make a shliach. So then the Gemara says that really, if you look at kedusha biyah in and of itself, That's something that cannot be done through a shliach, and therefore you shouldn't be able to make a t'nai in it. But since it's lumped together with other things like kedusha kesef and kedusha shtar, which can be done through a shliach, therefore you could make a t'nai in kedusha kesef and kedusha shtar. Then you can make a t'nai in kedusha bia. So the Rishonim ask, you have kedusha kesef, which you could make a t'nai in. You have kedusha shtar, which you could make a t'nai in, and you have kedusha bia, which you cannot make a t'nai in. Or not that you cannot make a t'nai, you cannot do it like a shliach. Therefore, you would think you cannot make a t'nai with it. Why is it that when you are comparing them to each other, you compare kedusha bia to kedusha kesef, and you learn from there that you could make a t'nai? Maybe do it the opposite way. Maybe learn kedusha kesef from kedusha bia that you cannot make a t'nai. So the Ritva says it's a very simple thing. It's 2 against 1. Out of the 3 ways of making kedusha kesef can be done with a t'nai because it can be done through a shliach. Kedusha shtar can be done with a t'nai because it can be done through a shliach. So the lone kedusha bia, even though it cannot be done through a shliach, can also be done with a t'nai. Okay, gewaltig. Zok the heilige Gemara weiter. Omer Rav Ula bar Abba Omer Ula. Rav Ula bar Abba said in the name of Ula. So I guess there were 2 Ulas. Omer Rabbi Lozer, the name of Rabbi Lozer. Hamakadosh b'milva. Someone is makadosh with a milva. And what does it mean makadosh b'milva? Rashi says that she owed him money, and shemocha lo milva shechayaves lo. She owed him $100, and he says, "I'm going to forgive the chiyuv that you have to pay me." That will not be a good kedushin. You know what? Because he's not giving her anything now at the time that he's being meichel the yichayv. The misha shalovsa, as soon as he gave her the cash in the past, nitna loitza, that milva was not made for her to hold on to. That loan was made for her to spend. Ubeshus kaima, and it's already in her shus. Bahasha, now that he's forgiving that chayv, lav midi yoivla, he's not giving her money now. And therefore, it's not a good kedushin. So he did something that was a puzzle of kedushin, ubahal, and then he was boiled. Or al tanai, or he made kedushin al tanai, like a tanai al menashe ein aleh nedarim, similar to the case that we've been discussing, ubahal, and then he was boiled. Or bepachas mishavar pruta ubahal. So let's stop before we see what Rabbi Lozer says. Let's think about what Rabba said. Rabba said, if you make kedushin al tanai, and then you're boiled, what does Rabbi say? Rabbi says that everybody agrees that the bia will not be a good kedushin because he just had a t'nai in the kedusha kesef that he made. That's what Rabbi told us. That's what we chaz it over. That's what we had on the Itmanami or Mabacha. Let's see what Rabbi Lozer said. Divrei HaKoil, everybody agrees, shricha heimenu get. She will need a get. Well, that's clearly not like what Rabbi said. So Tosfos points that out. And Tosfos says, Divrei HaKoil shricha heimenu get, v'loi pligi Rabbi Shmuel ela b'kansa v'loi boal o pligi adabai. He's going to learn that Rav and Shmuel, when they have their machloikis, it's only if there was no bia there. If there was no bia there, then you say everybody agrees no get is required, and the nesuin is not a good nesuin if there was a t'nai. However, if there was an actual bia, Rabbi Lozer holds divrei kol tricha menu get. In fact, we say that he had kavana to do kedushin with the bia. Omer Rabbi Yosef bar Abba, Omer Rabbi Menachem, Omer Rabbi Ami. I'm a kaddish b'pachas mishavar pruta. If you're mekadosh with less than shavar pruta, which clearly is not a good kedushin, ubal, and then he was loyal, shricha menu get. There we'll say that the bia that he did, he had in mind to do a kedusha bia. B'hahu deloitoi, only in the case of a mekadosh b'pachas mishavar pruta, because everybody knows that less than a shavar pruta is not a good kedushin. So therefore, when he made a bia, he knew at the time of the bia that there was no kedushin yet. So therefore, he has in mind with the bia to make a kedushin. Avu bahanach, But the other two examples, such as Bal al Atnai or Bal b'milva, where not everybody knows. A Bal b'milva, not everybody knows that making kedushin with a milva wouldn't work. So he thinks that the kedushin was chal, and when he made the biyah based on the kedushin having already been chal, and in fact that's mistaken, and therefore no get is required. The same thing with a mekadesh b'tos, meaning he made kedushin on a t'nai, thinking that she was not someone who had the darim on her. In fact, she was, but he's still thinking that there's a kedushin, and therefore with the biyah he doesn't have kavanah for a kedushin. Amr of Kana Mishmei Dula, Hamakadesh al T'nai Ubal, someone who's Makadesh al T'nai that she has no Nadarim, and then he was boiler, Shricha Menu Get, and needs a get, which is like what we said earlier from Rabbi Lozer, not like Rabbanim. In Zelia Maisa, there was such a Maisa where someone was Makadesh al T'nai, and then he was boiler, and it turned out she had Nadarim. The Chacham didn't feel comfortable releasing her without a get, because they felt that when he made the biyah, he had in mind kedushin as well. Well, Fukam Haitana, and this would be inconsistent with the following Tana. It says in the pasuk that if a woman was mezana and vihi loinit basa, and she wasn't forced, asura, she will be also to her husband because she was mezana. And we're medaik, hanit basa. What if she was forced? What if this wasn't willingly? Mutaris, then she'll be mutter to her husband. However, v'yesh loch acheres, there is another woman. It's vehila nitbasa, asura on nitbasa mutaris. But there's another woman, shafabisha loy nitbasa, even though she wasn't forced, mutaris, it's still mutter. So a woman who had relations with a man other than her husband, and she wasn't forced, and we still don't consider her an oyefes, and we don't make her also to her husband. What's an example of such a woman? This is a woman who he was Makadesh Manas, that she has no Nadarim, and in fact she had Nadarim, and he made Biyah. It will not be considered a marriage. And after, so again, he made Kedusha in Amanas that she did not have Nadarim. Then he made Biyah, and in fact she had Nadarim. So there we say that not only was the original Kedusha not a good Kedushin, but the Biyah was also not L'Shem Kedushin, and we do not consider her to be a married woman, and therefore, if she's mezana, she doesn't become usher. Even if she became pregnant from that biyah, and she has a child from the first husband, we still don't consider it that she's actually married to the first husband, because there was never a kedushin that was chal, and therefore, now this doesn't literally mean miyun, because we're not talking about a case of miyun. We're just talking about a woman who was married with a t'nai, and the t'nai was not in the sky, because in fact she is a woman with nadarim, but she will be mutter to the man who's the father of her child, because she was never married to him, so therefore she never became usher because of this news. Tanur Rabban, a woman had nadarim, and someone was mekadesh her and said, I'm being mekadesh al manas that you have no nadarim, but in fact she had nadarim. After this happened, holcha etzel chacham v'tira. She went to a chacham and she was shoyl on another. Mikudeshes, the kedushin is chal. She only was shoyl on another after the t'nai, and at that point there was another on her. So the Gemara is going to explain why. What if he says, I'm marrying you, that you don't have any mumen, and she had a mumen, but after the kedushin al t'nai, she went to a doctor and she was healed of her mumen. Veripay, etzel reifa veripay. And he healed her. She will not be mukadeshes. Frag the Gemara, ma bein chacham l'reife. Why is it that when the chacham takes off the nether, which killed its nai, there we say we look at it like the nether was never there, and her marriage is good. But if the t'nai was she shouldn't have mumen, and she went to the doctor afterwards and he healed it, we say that the t'nai says that there's no marriage. So the Gemara, the answer is simple. Chacham oikers and make car. What did the Chacham do? He asks, if you would have known ABC, would you have made a nether? And she'll say no. So he says, the nether was never a good nether from the beginning. He uprooted Meikar. So come to Chais, it's a gloy milsalam afreya, that at the time of the Kedushin, she didn't have a nether on her. But the Raifa could only heal her moving forward. But at the time that the kedushin was made with the tonight that she has no mum, in fact she had a mum, so the kedushin wasn't chal. Right? The Gemara about Tanya, it's al chacham v'tira, it's al roife v'ribai sha'inu mukadeshes. We have a brayso that says even by a nether, the fact that the chacham was matir after the fact will not make it a good kedushin. And for the Gemara Merava Lekasha, Harab Meir, Harab Elazar, it's totally in Reb Meir and Reb Elazar. Whether or not a woman who had the Nedarim upon her, and then after the kedushin, she went to be shoyal by a chacham, whether or not that will allow the kedushin to be chal is totally in the machlokes between Reb Meir and Reb Elazar. And I'm going to spill the beans even before we learn it. It's because Reb Elazar holds ein adam rejet his baza ishtar. A man will not want to marry a woman who had a neder, even if she'll be able to be shoyal on the neder. You know why? Because he doesn't want to marry a woman that she should have to go embarrass herself in front of her rav to be shoyal on her neder. He doesn't even want such a wife. So even if she'll be able to be shoyal on the neder, and it will be oikad, I don't want such a wife b'chlal that's going to have to do such a thing. So therefore, it doesn't help that you retroactively remove the nether. I don't want a wife who had an adar to remove retroactively either. And therefore, it wouldn't be a good kedushin. And that's the machlokes between these two brises. If she was shoyal on a nether, will it activate the kedushin? Zok the Gemara, Lakash Harab Meir Harab Elazar. Harab Meir the Omer Adam Roichet Shet is Vaza Ishtay Bebezdin. Reb Meir holds that he doesn't have a problem if she goes to be shoyal on her nether. He doesn't mind. And Harab Elazar the Omer in Adam Roichet Shet is Vaza Ishtay Bebezdin. When a person marries a woman, he doesn't want to marry a woman who's going to have to humiliate herself and go to Bezdin and open up her life and be shoyal to Bezdin. And therefore, even if he's shoyal, he doesn't want such a wife, and his Tanai will exclude her as well. Mahi, where do you see they're arguing about this concept? Zaktamor, that's not to be learned. If a man has a wife who made a nether, and because of that, he gave her a get, he was unhappy that she had this nether. Rashi, she was in the dramas. She was a woman who makes the door. He didn't want such a wife, so he divorced her. The halach is loy yachser. He's never ever allowed to marry her back. Why is he never allowed to marry her back? There's two possible reasons. There's one reason, because it can mess her up. Because imagine he gives her a get because she made the dorm, and then she goes and marries somebody else. And then she's shoyal on her nether. And he says, wow, had I known that she would be shoyal on her nether, I would have never given her up. I wanted her. I would have never divorced her. I only divorced her on the false pretext that she couldn't be shoyal on her nether. But now that she was shoyal on her nether, I regret it. So her get now will be bottled, yet she's married to another man, Be'isr, so she's also the Baal, she's also the Boil, and if she has children, her children are Mamzer. So to avoid such a scenario, we tell a man, if you're divorcing her because she made another, be aware. No matter what happens, you'll never be able to marry her again. So that eliminates the possibility of him being the culprit. That's one reason why we wouldn't let her remarry. But there's another reason why. The other reason why we wouldn't let him marry her again is to cancel her. It's because we want to teach her a lesson. Don't be in the drunnness. You're going to be in the drunnness, you're going to mess up your life, you're going to permanently lose your husband, and you'll never get him back. So it says as follows in the Brisa. He's never allowed to take her back. Mishum Shemra, what if she had bad reputation that she was fooling around? He divorced her for that. Again, lo yachser, for the same reason, because we're afraid that if he'll find out in fact that the rumors were false, and he'll regret that he divorced her, and she had already married somebody else, he could be makalkaler by being mevatel again. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, kol neder sheyadu b'rabim lo yachser. If she made a neder that everyone knows about, then you could never take it back, because Rabbi Yehuda holds that it's not because of kilkul. Rabbi Yehuda holds that if she's so brazen that she makes such strong nedarim barabim that you cannot be mefer, there we want to cancel, and therefore kol neder sheyadu b'rabim, that's lo yachser. But lo yadu b'rabim, if she made a private neder that he could be mefer, that's not as brazen of her, and therefore we will allow her to come back. So Rabbi Yehuda learns the reason why we don't let him ever take her back. If he divorces her because of another, it's not because he'll be makalkaler, but rather it's because we want to concert, we want to punish her. We'll punish her when she makes a brazen nether. If she makes a regular nether, we won't punish her. Rav Meir Omer, kol nether shetzarech chakiras chacham lo yachzer. Any nether that she has to be shoyal by a chacham, he could never ever take her back. And the reason for that is, like we said before, Rashi says, because of kilkel. If it needs a shaylas chacham, then he could say, the only reason why I divorced her is because of the nether, but had I known she could be shoyal, I would have never divorced her. So there's a problem of her being mekolkol. She might end up being usher to both men. She might end up having children that are mamzerim. So therefore, kol nether shetzarech chakiras chacham lo yachzer. But v'she'ein tzarech chakiras chacham yachzer. But if it's just needs a farah, then in fact he could divorce her and he could take her back, because over there's no chashash kilkel. He can't say, if I would have known she could be shoyal. He knows he could be mefer. Since he knows he could be mefer, there's no chashash kilkel. So Reb Meir learns that the chashash of why you don't take a woman back if you divorce her because of a nether is because of a chashash kilkel. And Amar Rabbi Lazar, on that Rabbi Lazar commented, is it's exactly the opposite. Lo asru tzarech elam mipnei she'ein tzarech. Be'etzem, if it needed a sheilas chacham, you would let him take her back, because there's no problem. There's no problem because he doesn't want her anyway. There he can't say. Had I known you'll be shoyal, I would have wanted you back, because he doesn't want a woman at all who's an adronis. The only reason why they answered a woman who makes a nether that you could be shoyal by a chacham, but you cannot make a farah, is elam mipnei she'einay tzarech. It's only because of those nedarim that do not need shelas chacham that he can be mefer. And Rashi says over there's kilkel. Why? Elam mipnei she'einay tzarech she'hatzarech chakiras chacham. If you have a nether that needs chakiras chacham, ain't by kilkel. There's no chashash that they'll be kilkel. You know why? The lav kol kiminei loymar. He can't say ilu hayisu yedea. If I would have known you could be shoyal, I would have never divorced you, because I don't want you to be shoyal. And even if I would have known that you could be shoyal, I still wouldn't have wanted to keep you. A person doesn't want his wife to be shoyal. So why do they ask her, a woman if she made a nether that she could be shoyal on, that he can't be mefer? Only exera because of nedarim that he could be mefer. Because of nedarim that don't need shelos chacham, that he could be made for himself. What's the problem if he could be made for himself? He could lie and tell us, I didn't realize I could make al for her. I gave her a get, but had I known that I could be made for, I would never have given her a get. And therefore there'll be a kilkel. Once we say that if you divorce her because of a regular nether that you can make a farah on, you cannot take her back, you cannot take her back for any nether. But once we reveal this new svara of a person doesn't want to be married to a woman, even if she's shoyal on the nether, because he doesn't want a woman who has to go to Besman in the first place, we now understand this machloikis of whether or not a woman was shoyal on her nether. Do we say that now the Tnai was Niskayim and the Kedushin is good? If the Kedushin is good, it's because a man has no problem if his wife is shoyal, and therefore if she's shoyal on the nether, then the Tnai is good, because he said, Amanash ein la nadarim, and the Tigloy Muslim afresh, he had no nadarim. But if we hold, like Rabbi Lozer, that a person never wants to marry a woman who makes a nadarim because he doesn't want it to have to go to the Chacham as well, so then even if she went to the Chacham and she was made for the nether, it doesn't matter. He doesn't want her anyway. The Tnai would have excluded her as well. So that is that machlokes. Zakbar, my time of the Rabbi Yehuda. What is this for Rabbi Yehuda, who says that if you have a nether that was made by Rabbim, it's lo yachzer, because that nether you cannot have a farah on. So how do you know that a nether that's made by Rabbim you cannot be made for? So tomorrow, because it says that Klal Yisrael promised the Gevonim that they would not kill them, and therefore once they made that promise, it was a promise by Rabbim, even though they found out in fact that they were Mishiva Aramin, Lahikum b'nei Yisrael ki nishbu lahem nesiya eda. since they swore in public, they did not be shoyl on the nether, even though it was made under false pretext, because a nether that's done barabim, you could not be shoyl on at all.
Yeah, it's interesting when you say that. When they went to fill out stuff, it wasn't a nether, it was a deal with them.
Yeah, but it wasn't a nether. That's right. They made a hoax.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay, so let's stop here, and we will be mamshech b'ezras tomorrow. So during this week, we'll learn every day at 5:50, at 10 to 6. We have 10 minutes less to do the daf. I'll try to rush it up. So far today, we did it. So hopefully, we'll be able to keep up the whole week as well. Okay, have a wonderful day. Shkoyach.
It was 15 minutes.